Haunting Lucy. Chapter 1. The dollhouse arrived on a Tuesday, left on our doorstep in a big cardboard box. I remember pulling back the flaps eagerly, hoping Mom had sent me something nice for once, instead of the usual half-hearted trinkets she picked up on business trips to make herself feel better about the divorce. But this was different. The Victorian dollhouse gleamed even in the dim sunlight of our foyer, the dark wood exterior with its ornate shingles and wrought iron trim striking against the plain cardboard. I glanced over at Mom, who was watching me anxiously. "It was your grandmother's," she said. "I thought you should have it." I ran my hands along the smooth, cool surface, examining the tiny lanterns that actually held real candles, the intricate gingerbread woodwork. Something about it seemed lonely, like it had been waiting a long time for me. "It's perfect," I whispered. I stood up and did something I hadn't done since I was little. I gave my mom a spontaneous hug. She froze for a second before hugging me back tightly. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my mother back. We spent the rest of the afternoon up in the attic, clearing away boxes to make space for the massive dollhouse. It filled up nearly the whole room, its presence making the attic feel like a cozy nook instead of a cluttered storage space. I added the finishing touch that night, placing the family of Victorian dolls Mom had included into the dollhouse's rooms. For the first time in months, I fell asleep feeling at peace. The next morning before school, I stopped to admire the dollhouse again. In the early morning light filtering through the attic window, it seemed even more beautiful, like an ancient artifact I was meant to find. I was reluctant to leave it for the day, but Mom called me down to catch the bus. With one last longing glance back, I headed off to my lonely 7th grade day. The other girls whispered about me as usual, the freaky poor girl with the divorced mom who wore old clothes and never talked. I ignored them as always, clutching my books and hurrying past. My only friend Josh tried to talk to me at lunch, but I could tell he knew something was up. I was dying to get back home to the dollhouse, wanting to tell him about it but feeling oddly possessive. It was going to be my secret, at least for now. As soon as I got home, I rushed up to the attic after a quick hello to Mom. The dollhouse seemed to glow and welcome as I approached it. The family of dolls gazed up at me from their rooms, elegant 1800s clothes perfectly crafted. For the first time, I spoke to them aloud. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you now," I whispered, gently stroking the small porcelain heads. I stayed up in the attic for hours, only coming down when Mom yelled at me to do homework and eat dinner. That night I dreamed of dancing with the Victorian family inside the glowing dollhouse, wearing a beautiful silk gown. For the first time in forever, I felt at home. Chapter 2. Over the next few days, I spent all my free time up in the attic with the dollhouse. I started doing my homework there instead of my room, sneaking up granola bars and soda to have mini picnics. Mom just shook her head when she saw the stockpile of snacks, but she didn't stop me. I think she understood this was the only thing breaking me out of my depression. By Friday, I came up with a brilliant idea. I would sleep in the attic on the weekends so I could be with the dollhouse all night. Mom agreed after I promised to keep up with homework and chores. That night I made up a little bed on the floor, surrounded by the glow of the dollhouse. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a tiny voice whisper, "Lucy." At first I thought I was dreaming, but it came again, louder. "Lucy." My eyes flew open. Was I going crazy? But no, one of the Victorian dolls inside the house was waving her tiny porcelain arm. I gasped, sitting straight up and scooting closer. "Lucy, you're finally here," the doll said. "We've waited so long for you." "Who are you?" I whispered. The doll curtsied daintily. "Abigail. And this is the Wells family." She gestured to the other dolls, who all began moving and nodding. "We're so pleased you found our dollhouse. You're the one we've waited for." I couldn't believe it. Actual ghosts, living in my dollhouse. I wasn't scared though, I was fascinated. We talked for hours that night, the Wells dolls telling me about their past lives in the Victorian era. I learned more about them in that one night than I had ever learned in history class. The next morning over breakfast, Mom noticed a change in me right away. "You seem in a better mood," she said, as I cheerfully ate my pancakes instead of sullenly pushing them around my plate like usual. "I'm glad you're spending so much time on your hobby." If only she knew just how amazing my hobby had become. I was itching to get back to Abigail and the Wells family all through my chores and homework that day. Finally it was evening, and I rushed through dinner to get upstairs as soon as I could. The moment I approached the dollhouse, Abigail waved excitedly. "Lucy, we want to show you something." She led me around the back, where I noticed a small door I hadn't seen before. It glowed faintly. "What's that?" I asked. "A portal," Abigail replied. "To our spirit world. We'd like you to join us there." I hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through my exhilaration. But Abigail took my hand gently, her small porcelain fingers warm instead of cold. "Don't worry, you'll be perfectly safe," she said. "We've been so lonely, with no one living to talk to. We just want a friend." My curiosity won out over caution. "Okay," I agreed. "Just for a little while." Abigail smiled and led me through the glowing doorway. I glanced back once at the dim attic, then stepped into the light. Chapter 3. Stepping through the doorway was like entering another world. The air shimmered around me, thick and hazy. I blinked, trying to get my bearings. "Welcome to the spirit world," said Abigail. She was no longer a tiny porcelain doll, but a full-sized girl in an old-fashioned lace dress. The other Wells family members, also human-sized, stood around us in a semicircle. Their faces were pale and their eyes huge, but they smiled warmly at me. I looked around, awestruck. We stood in what looked like the Wells family's parlor from when they were alive, but there were no walls or ceilings. The room's contents just floated in the swirling mist. "How is this possible?" I asked. "The dollhouse acts as a portal between the spirit world and your world," explained Abigail. "We can visit you, and you can visit us. As long as the dollhouse exists, so do we." A chilling thought occurred to me. "Have you taken other kids here before?" The family members shuffled their feet uncomfortably. "A few have found the dollhouse over the decades," said Abigail. "But they were always too scared to understand us. Not like you, Lucy." I felt pleased that she thought I was brave. Abigail took my hand again. "Come, we'll show you around." The family gave me a tour of the spirit world, which was a patchwork of rooms and objects from their lives. We flew from place to place weightlessly, their cold hands gripping mine. The ghostly world was beautiful, but also lonely. Back in the parlor, we gathered around an ornate tea set that floated midair. As I sipped the ghostly tea, I had an idea. "What if you could visit my world more fully?" I asked. "Instead of just being tiny dolls in the house." The ghost's eyes lit up. "You mean, possess you?" breathed Abigail. I nodded. Possession sounded scary, but I trusted my new friends. To my delight, they agreed eagerly. We decided Abigail would go first. Back in the attic, I sat cross-legged before the dollhouse and closed my eyes. "Are you ready?" whispered Abigail. "Yes," I said. A cold shiver crept down my spine. Suddenly, I felt Abigail's presence rush into my body. My spine stiffened, and my eyes flew open. I slowly stood up, marveling at the feeling of my legs moving on their own accord. It was like I was watching myself from far away. Abigail did a small pirouette with my body, grinning. It worked, she cried gleefully. The family clapped happily. I relaxed, relieved it didn't hurt. It was actually wonderful, seeing my life through her eyes. I let myself fall into the background, ceding control to Abigail. We spent the whole weekend switching back and forth, each ghost taking turns possessing my body. They particularly liked experiencing modern food and technology. I didn't even mind when school came Monday, the ghosts kept me chipper, whispering advice and observations. My teachers noticed the improved attitude. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," said my math teacher approvingly. By the end of the day, the ghosts were drained from so much activity. Back at home, I slept deeply, feeling closer to my spirit friends than ever before. This was even better than I imagined. What could go wrong? Chapter 4. The possessions became a regular part of my routine over the next few weeks. Each evening and weekend, a different ghost would take over my body for a few hours before passing it to the next spirit. We discovered the more we practiced, the longer the ghosts could stay in control before getting tired. Soon they possessed me almost constantly at home, only releasing my body when I needed to eat, use the bathroom, or sleep. At first, I didn't mind. I loved seeing my world through their delighted perspectives. The ghosts marveled at light bulbs, automobiles, and refrigerators, overwhelmed by the futuristic technology. "Simply marvelous," exclaimed Margaret Wells as she drove us to school one morning. I relaxed happily in the back seat of my mind as the ghosts took turns steering my body throughout the day. My teachers praised the ghosts' perfect manners and eagerness to learn. "You're like a whole new student, Lucy," said Mrs. Banner, my English teacher. Even Mom noticed the change, commenting on my cheerful demeanor. Josh remained the only skeptic. "Something seems off about you lately," he remarked at lunch as I neatly cut my meatloaf into tidy bites under Abigail's direction. "You're acting really weird." "Nonsense," I replied briskly. "I've simply turned over a new leaf." I continued eating daintily as Josh's eyes narrowed. The ghosts also enjoyed visiting Josh using my body. "Fascinating," exclaimed Edgar Wells. "This telephone device is even beyond my imagination." Josh seemed baffled as I enthusiastically discussed telegrams and Morse code instead of the latest memes like usual. At night, the ghosts continued showing me around the spirit world through the dollhouse portal. We danced at elaborate ghostly balls and took long walks through the swirling mists. I grew so used to Abigail's constant presence in my mind that I felt lonely without her. One night Mom came up to the attic, startling us. "Lucy, don't you want to watch TV with me anymore?" she asked sadly. I wanted to reassure her, but Abigail shooed her away. "We're having too much fun to worry about such things," said Abigail dismissively after Mom left. Something about her tone bothered me, but the ghosts distracted me with a midnight picnic under the stars. I pushed my unease away, lost in their infectious joy. Yet soon, I noticed the ghosts becoming more clingy. They resisted leaving my body for even brief periods, finding excuses to stay in control. "Lucy's tired, we should let her rest," said Abigail when I tried to reclaim myself to call Josh. Her grip on my mind tightened as the others murmured agreement. I tried asserting myself the next morning before school. "Time for me to take over," I said firmly after breakfast. "But Lucy, we might miss something exciting," protested Abigail. The ghosts pulled me into the background despite my resistance. Disturbed, I wondered if I had made a mistake in allowing the possessions. Chapter 5. My unease grew over the next few days as the ghosts remained firmly entrenched in my body, ignoring my attempts to reclaim control. At school, they delighted in answering questions in class and socializing with my peers. My teachers were amazed at my raised hand and constant eagerness to participate. "Lucy, it's wonderful to see you come out of your shell," said Mrs. Banner. I tried to cry out, to signal that something was wrong, but the ghost stifled me. Josh gave me searching looks in the hallways as I walked briskly past with perfect posture, ignoring him. At home, the spirits happily cooked elaborate meals using odd Victorian recipes, leaving Mom puzzled. "Rice pudding and calf's foot jelly?" she asked, poking at the congealed dishes. "Are you sure you're feeling okay?" "Never better," I proclaimed in Edgar's plummy tones before rushing back upstairs over Mom's protests. In the safety of my room that night, I confronted the ghosts as they chattered excitedly about the day's activities. "You're possessing me too much," I said angrily. "I want my life back." The ghosts' smiling faces fell. "But Lucy," Abigail protested. "We need you. We have no one else." "This was only supposed to be temporary," I insisted. "You said you just wanted a friend, not my whole existence." The ghosts murmured unhappily amongst themselves. Abigail glided over to take my hands pleadingly. "A few more days, that's all we ask," she implored. "We'll be more careful, but we're not ready to lose you yet." I wavered. They seemed sincere, and I didn't want to abandon my friends. "A few days only," I agreed reluctantly. "But then things go back to normal." Abigail smiled. "Of course. You have my word." She hugged me as the other ghosts nodded enthusiastically. Yet over the next few days, I realized the ghosts had no intention of leaving. They acted hurt and offended when I insisted it was time for them to go. "But Lucy, we thought we were going to be together forever," said Abigail, eyes wide and sad. The others chimed in. "You can't leave us now," cried Edgar Wells. Their tearful pleas made me hesitate. I didn't want them to feel betrayed. "Just a little longer," I found myself saying instead of putting my foot down. By the end of the week, I was a prisoner in my own body. I screamed and fought as the ghosts forced me into the background. They simply tuned me out, absorbed in experiencing my life. I managed to steal a few minutes while Abigail napped to call Josh. "Help, ghosts." I gasped before they yanked away the phone. "Sorry, Josh, must dash," said Abigail cheerfully. I sobbed in frustration. That night, my vision filled with the spirit world's swirling mists as the ghosts prepared to drag me through the dollhouse portal for a midnight ball. I struggled furiously. "Let me go. This ends now." To my shock, hands grabbed me firmly from behind, pulling me free from the ghosts' grips. "Run, Lucy," yelled Josh. The ghosts shrieked in rage as Josh and I sprinted away. Chapter 6. Josh dragged me to his car, peeling out down the street away from my house. The ghosts clung to me, weighing down my limbs as they tried to repossess my fleeing body. "Let her go," Josh shouted, shaking me hard. My head rattled painfully, dislodging the spirits for a moment. Josh took advantage, accelerating even faster. The ghosts wailed as their connection weakened the farther we drove. After a few minutes, I felt their cold grips release me entirely. I sagged back against the seat in relief. "It's really you, right, Lucy?" Josh asked worriedly. "Yeah, they're gone," I sighed. "Thanks for saving me." I quickly explained everything: the dollhouse portal, befriending the ghosts, and finally losing control. I knew something weird was going on. Josh exclaimed. "You were so zoning out on me, just parroting stuff about telegrams." He shook his head. "Possession is bad news. We've got to destroy that dollhouse tonight." Panic flared in me at the thought. "No. I can't, the ghosts are my friends." Josh snorted. "Some friends. Friends don't take over your body against your will. They just got overeager," I mumbled lamely. "I can reason with them. They need me." Josh pulled over, turning to stare at me in disbelief. "Lucy, you can't be serious. This has gone way too far." Those friends of yours are dangerous. I squirmed under his scrutiny, knowing he was right but unable to admit it. The ghosts were a part of my life now. I couldn't imagine just abandoning them forever. Josh sighed. Look, it's late. Let's just focus on keeping them away from you tonight, then we can figure this out tomorrow. Reluctantly I agreed. Josh drove us back to his place, salt in hand. He lined the windowsills and doors of the guest room I'd be sleeping in. The ghosts shouldn't be able to cross the salt lines, he explained. But we both jumped when the doors suddenly slammed open, revealing a glowering Abigail. Lucy, you betrayed us, she accused as the other spirits crowded behind her. Before we could react, they rushed into the room, knocking over the salt line. They surrounded me where I cowered on the bed. Because we care for you, we forgive this foolishness, said Abigail imperiously. Now come home. Their ghostly hands reached out, but Josh leapt forward, brandishing his phone. Hey Google, play gospel music, full volume, he yelled. A tinny gospel choir suddenly blasted through the phone speakers. The ghosts shrieked, recoiling from the blessed music and lyrics. Josh and I darted past them out of the room, slamming the door shut. We barricaded ourselves in the living room, music playing. The ghosts pounded angrily on the walls but seemed unable to enter. Around dawn, the house finally went silent. Josh and I slumped on the couch in relief. But we both knew the ghosts weren't gone for good. At school, I jittered anxiously all day, dreading returning home. Josh and I decided we had to destroy the dollhouse that night. I only hoped my love for the ghosts wouldn't stop me when the time came. As expected, the spirits waited in my room as I reluctantly entered after school. Their anger had faded, replaced by eagerness. Lucy, you're back, cried Abigail joyfully. We're so relieved. We can be together again. She smiled and held out her arms invitingly. The familiar temptation to give in warred inside me. Josh intervened, stepping forward before I could waver. Listen up, spooks, he said sternly. You can't keep violating Lucy's free will. Either you go willingly, or we'll force you out. The ghosts' faces twisted in fury. How dare you, hissed Edgar Wells. Lucy loves us. She understands our need. Begone, boy. Their spectral hands shot out, seizing Josh. He shouted as they began dragging him towards the attic. I found my resolve. Stop. I yelled. Let him go. If you want me to stay, you have to stop this insanity. The ghosts paused, wavering. I pressed my advantage. Prove yourselves good friends. Release Josh, and agree to reasonable possession limits, or our friendship ends. I held my breath. The ghosts muttered, spirits low. Finally Abigail sighed. Very well, Lucy. We agree to your terms. They released Josh. I hugged him in relief, but kept a wary eye on the ghosts. We had won this battle, but the war wasn't over yet. Destroying the dollhouse might be the only way to be truly free of them. Chapter 7. After making the ghosts vow to leave us alone for the night, Josh and I holed up in my room to research the dollhouse's history. If we could figure out its origins, maybe a solution would present itself. I booted up my laptop as Josh peered out the window. No creepy dolls lurking outside that I can see, he reported. While Josh stood guard, I scoured the web for clues. After hours of searching, I finally unearthed a newspaper article from 1892. The headline read, Wells family perishes in tragic fire. My heart squeezed. According to the article, the Wells family died when their mansion burned down one night. Everyone assumed it was a horrible accident. But there was speculation that the youngest daughter Abigail set the fire, driven by a mysterious, murderous madness. Abigail killed her own family, I whispered. Josh and I shared a grave look. No wonder she and the other ghosts were so obsessed with clinging to the dollhouse portal, it was their only escape from purgatory. I dug deeper, discovering records about the dollhouse being passed down through generations of my mother's family. Every so often, the new owner would mysteriously fall into a deep depression or madness. The ghosts! Josh exclaimed. They must have been possessing your ancestors, just like they did to you. It all made sense, the ghosts' endless pleas for, just a little more time, in my body, their irrational fury whenever I asserted myself. They were addicts, fixated on living again no matter the cost. We had to break their cycle of abuse. I squared my shoulders. We have to destroy the dollhouse tonight. Josh nodded firmly. We'll rip that sucker to splinters. The ghosts can't stop us. We spent the next few hours planning our attack, then crept upstairs to the attic as midnight struck. The dollhouse waited silently. I steeled myself, then strode forward and snatched up a Victorian doll, Abigail herself. Josh seized a nearby axe. On the count of 3, he said, raising it high. Suddenly, the attic window shattered, and a powerful wind blew open the door. The ghosts streamed into the room, faces raging. Betrayer! Abigail screamed. The spirits swarmed me, dragging me away from Josh. They hurled us apart, slamming the attic door shut between us. I was trapped alone with them. The ghosts circled me, ranting furiously. We gave you so much, and this is how you repay us. Seethed Abigail. I tried reasoning one last time. Haunting me won't bring you true peace. Let me set your spirits free. Never, they shouted. If we can't have the living, we'll destroy you both. Their phantom hands reached out hungrily. I dodged them, knowing I had to keep them occupied while Josh broke in. Racing downstairs, I lured them away from the attic. We burst into the kitchen, the ghosts snapping at my heels. Grabbing a container of salt, I spun and flung handfuls into their faces. They reeled back, wailing in pain. But more pressed forward. Josh, hurry! I cried as the ghosts clutched my arms. My strength gave out. With a final heave, I ripped open the sack of flour and threw it straight into the ghosts' faces. The fine powder exploded like a bomb, dissolving the spirits into wisps. But I knew it wouldn't hold them for long. Please, quickly! I sobbed. The ghost skeletal faces began reforming in the floury cloud, claw-like hands emerging. This was my last chance. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. Josh had smashed open the attic door. Grabbing his outstretched hand, I fled upstairs just as the ghosts fully reconstituted themselves. Their chilling screams of fury followed us as Josh swung the axe down with all his might. It cleaved straight through the dollhouse's gilded roof, lodging deep into the attic floorboards. The ghosts wailed, thrashing violently as light erupted from the ruined dollhouse. There was an ear-splitting explosion of energy that knocked Josh and me off our feet. Then silence. The dollhouse lay in crumbling pieces, finally destroyed. Dazed, Josh and I embraced in weary celebration. We were free. Chapter 8. Josh and I crept towards the dollhouse, axe gripped tightly in his hands. My heart pounded wildly. This was our only chance to end the ghost's invasion of my life. I reached out to grab the Victorian doll representing Abigail, determined to destroy it first. My fingers had just brushed the porcelain figure when an unearthly howl split the air. The attic window burst open, curtains flying violently as the wind gusted inside. Josh and I were thrown back against the wall as the ghosts streamed into the room, faces contorted in rage. Lucy, how could you betray us again? Screamed Abigail. She seized my arms, long nails digging painfully into my flesh. I cried out as the ghosts surrounded us. After all the joy we've shared, you'd still destroy us, said Edgar Wells, shaking his head sadly. I thought you were our truest friend. Their guilt-tripping words washed over me, but I refused to bend this time. Real friends don't take over someone's body against their will. I yelled. I strained against Abigail's grip. The dollhouse must be destroyed. It's the only way to set you free. Abigail's face twisted into a snarl. We don't want your pathetic freedom. She flung me back violently. I crashed into Josh as the wind rose to a shrieking gale force. We won't let you take our world from us, shouted Abigail over the wind's howl. If you won't join us willingly, we'll destroy you instead. The ghosts swirled around us in a whirling maelstrom, ghostly hands outstretched. Josh and I huddled together helplessly on the attic floor as they closed in. Their icy fingers slashed at us like claws. I cried out as they tore our clothes and skin, drawing blood. Josh swung out with the axe, but it passed harmlessly through their spectral forms. Josh, the salt! I gasped, spying the container we'd brought. We both lunged for it. Throwing out desperate handfuls, we managed to dissipate the ghosts momentarily. Seizing the chance, we stumbled downstairs, sealing the attic door shut behind us. But the ghosts were soon battering it furiously, shrieking and howling for our blood. Josh and I scrambled into his car, speeding off into the night. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I swerved around corners. But the ghosts weren't so easily deterred. My skin prickled as I felt them invading my mind once again, clouding my thoughts. Josh yelled panicked directions, trying to keep us on the road as my hands jerked the wheel. I slammed on the brakes just before we crashed into a tree. The seatbelt choked me as Josh yanked the emergency brake. Get out, Lucy, he cried. We tumbled from the car, the ghost's fury whipping my hair violently. Their mad cackles surrounded us on all sides. Josh half-dragged me across the empty street towards an old church we'd broken down near. If any place could offer asylum from the ghosts, it was holy ground. But the spirits redoubled their efforts, screeching deafeningly. They would do anything to stop us now. As we neared the gate, they swirled into a whirling dark mass above us. My gut twisted as I realized what was coming. Their darkness shot down, engulfing me and Josh entirely. I spiraled down into oblivion, my connection to Josh torn away. We had failed. The ghosts would never release me now. Chapter 9. My consciousness slowly returned to a void of gray fog. I was lying limply on a cold stone floor. As my vision focused, I realized I was in the ghostly ballroom deep in the spirit world. Iron shackles bound my wrists and ankles. I struggled weakly, but could not break free. Worst of all, my mind felt muted. The ghosts must be blocking my psychic powers to prevent me escaping through the dollhouse back to the physical world. I managed to sit up. To my immense relief, I saw Josh lying beside me, also regaining groggy awareness. The ghosts had kidnapped us both. Josh, are you okay? I whispered. He nodded, face pale but determined. Before we could speak further, Abigail and the other ghosts drifted into the ballroom. Her mouth twisted into a cruel sneer as she towered over us. Did you really think we'd allow you to destroy our sanctuary? I glared up at her defiantly. You can't keep us here forever. Oh, but we can, purred Abigail. We have all of eternity in the spirit world. You should never have defied us. The ghosts descended on us. I winced as they unlocked my shackles only to begin manipulating my limbs like a puppet. I fought their possession, trying to close off my mind. Dance for us, Lucy, Abigail commanded. Dance like we used to at our balls. Despite my resistance, my legs jerked into motion, stiffly twirling and leaping around the room. Josh shouted angrily as Edgar Wells forced him to join the grotesque dance. "We know this latest betrayal means you'll never join us willingly again," said Abigail, circling us. "So now your bodies will entertain us forever, hollow vessels for us to inhabit." As we spun closer, Josh's eyes bored into mine. I realized he was trying to communicate silently. On the next turn, he whispered under the music's swell. "The home field advantage, it's our turn." I grasped his meaning. For once, we were deep in the ghost's domain instead of the other way around. We had to take back control. I focused my inner sight, searching for the tether connecting my spirit to my physical body. There. I could just make out the glowing cord. With immense effort, I began dragging myself back down it, pulling my possession-entranced body towards consciousness. Behind me, I sensed Josh doing the same. Howling in rage, the ghosts tried slamming us back. But now our spirits were fully engaged. We streaked back down the tethers as Abigail shrieked our names. I crashed back into my body with a force that jarred my teeth. Beside me Josh gasped, equally disoriented. We were sprawled on my attic floor by the dollhouse once more. "Quick, block them out!" I yelled. We scrambled up, concentrating on sealing out the ghosts that battered furiously at our minds. The dollhouse trembled. "To me, Josh!" I shouted. Together, we seized the Victorian doll representing Abigail. I could feel her spirit writhing inside it. Summoning all my power, I forced open the tiny doll mouth. "Begone!" Josh and I shouted. A thin wisp of ghostly vapor trailed out with an unearthly scream. The real Abigail shrieked in sync, her spirit form dissolving as we destroyed her physical anchor. I tossed the doll aside, grabbing the axe as the remaining ghosts howled in despair. Their powers turned feeble as Abigail's presence vanished. Before they could recover and flee, I swung with all my might. The axe blade cleaved through the dollhouse's gilded roof, splitting it in two. The spirits wailed, sucked backwards into the collapsing house as its magic failed. With my final stroke, I smashed apart the attic floor, shattering the dollhouse's foundation. The spirits' phantom wails faded into silence. Josh and I collapsed in exhaustion and relief. It was finally over. We were free. Chapter 10. I expected to feel devastated after losing the ghosts I'd considered friends. But as the days passed, I realized I felt light, like a crushing weight had lifted. The dollhouse's destruction freed me as much as it did them. Mom wept with relief when Josh and I told her the whole story. She'd had no idea the antique she gifted me carried such darkness. We had a long talk, really reconnecting for the first time in years. Being possessed had made me appreciate control over my own body and life. I relished making my own choices each day, what to wear, what to eat for breakfast, who to hang out with. It felt amazing. Josh and I grew closer than ever. We got permission from our parents to demolish the attic completely, removing every last splinter of the haunted dollhouse. I decided not to tell the ghost's full story to anyone else. Some secrets are better left buried. With Mom's support, I made more of an effort to open up at school, slowly making new friends and coming out of my shell. I joined Josh and his buddies at lunch, learning how to chat about normal teen stuff instead of ghostly dolls. I discovered I could connect with the living when I made myself vulnerable. Letting people in was the antidote to the loneliness that the ghosts exploited. I spent more time with Mom too, trying to forgive her for the past. One night over dinner, she tentatively brought up looking at some old photo albums together. To her surprise, I agreed happily. We flipped through pictures of my childhood before the divorce, smiling over shared memories I'd locked away. There was a photo of 7-year-old me in front of the newly finished dollhouse, beaming. I remembered feeling awed by its imposing presence back then, before the darkness poisoned it. "You really loved that house," said Mom wistfully. "I'm so sorry about what happened." I squeezed her hand. "It wasn't your fault. Besides, the ghosts are free now, wherever they ended up." We sat in thoughtful silence. I knew Abigail and the others clung to their house so fiercely because it was their only remaining connection to life. Their destruction was also a release. I went to bed that night more at peace than I'd felt in a long time. Destroying the ghosts who had possessed me was like destroying the part of myself that was depressed and withdrawn. I was changing, becoming the person I wanted to be. The next day, I approached Josh with an idea. "We should do something to honor the good parts of the ghosts," I told him. "They were troubled souls, but some of our times together were meaningful." Josh agreed. We decided to create a little memorial garden for them in my backyard. We planted fragrant lavender bushes and forget-me-nots, setting up a bird bath in the middle. At dusk, Josh and I lit a candle before their new resting place. "May you find freedom," I whispered. The candle flame flickered steadily. I liked to imagine the ghosts watching over this garden, released from their curse. Whenever I missed them, I went out to tend the garden, pruning plants and filling the bird bath. Being surrounded by living things was healing, unlike the dead world of the dollhouse. Watching new flowers bloom reminded me to keep growing too. I made an effort to appreciate life's simple joys, laughing with Josh, daydreaming while gazing out classroom windows, feeling the sunshine on my skin. My bitter, closed-off personality completed its transformation. One crisp night, I sat on the back porch gazing up at the stars. Mom wrapped a blanket around me and sat down too. Together, we watched a streaking meteor blaze across the sky. "Make a wish," Mom whispered playfully. I closed my eyes. "I wish I'll keep changing, for the better." Opening them again, I leaned against Mom. For the first time in forever, my heart was full of hope. The end.